said, whoops, but I knew you were there.
Thank you for the teaching.
You're welcome. Better say that. This afternoon's Dharma talk is titled the Parivrajaka. Parivrajaka is I think it's a Sanskrit word, but I was probably have to count on Bhaskar to correct me. It could be Pali. I mean, it's actually what the Buddha was before he awoke. He was a wanderer. And that was a big thing in ancient India, people on a spiritual path. What is this about? What is life about? The Hindu religion is extremely complicated. There are forms of Hinduism that are atheistic. There are forms that are very, very theistic. There are forms that are pantheistic, and it's just quite a interesting display there. A good idea, because this allows lots of different kinds of people to actually have a spiritual path, rather than whereas even in monotheism, like Christianity, Islam, Judaism they have difficulty there, because then when people try to break off and do something differently, they look like they're wrong. They get condemned. Or perhaps, or maybe not, and some forms of Christianity are quite odd compared to another form of Christianity. This is also true in Buddhism, and even in Buddhism, even though the Buddha, in his wisdom, and I say that, it took me a while to see that's what it was, he made sure he didn't tighten things up so tight that he didn't have 18 different schools. Probably a lot more people saying, well, I think the Buddha, I think the way I look at it, we need to. And then, of course, the other one that I've repeated several times lately, just because I get quite a chuckle out of it when I think about how the Buddha said, those 250 precepts that I mentioned, yeah, don't worry about those. Forget about them. And then just before he keeled over or keeled onto his right side, he said, oh, you could keep a few of them, but he didn't say which ones. And then, of course, everybody had to say, well, I think he meant, well, probably don't kill was one of them, and don't take stuff that isn't given to you. That's when I was 18. I was still doing it when I was 18. Difficult. If you have some kind of habituation that doesn't seem to have a source, very difficult to work with that without trying to cut off the head of the snake, cut that off without knowing where it comes from. So the Parivrajaka, or the wanderer looking for the truth, looking for some kind of a deep understanding of what life is about. What is this about? At the time the Buddha was doing this, there were the Jains had been around for a couple hundred years. Correct me if I'm off on that, but I think so. I'm not a historian nor a scholar. And of course, all of the teachings that come out of the Upanishads and so on are quite lost in various forms that we would call the source of something. I can't really find a source for all of that. So the wanderer's progress. Recently gave a talk on progress. So you know how I feel about that word. And I'm always open to questions. I like to do this mutually. So I'll talk for a while, but if at some point it seems appropriate, or if you have a question about it, then we can go deeper into it, do it together based on your asking a question. So we're all kind of Parivrajakas. We're all who knows where we're going around and around. What we were going around to go to, and all the other ways of describing it. Trungpa Rinpoche, my first teacher, called that the confusion there, or the spiritual supermarket. Looking around for something. It's like you go into the supermarket and you wander around and around and around and around. Well, now we're in the veggies, and now we're in the meat, poultry, and now we're in canned goods and so on. And I think he was trying to point out through that metaphor that, at least my understanding of what he was saying is, you need to see that you're doing some of that, but at some point you need to find something that seems to resonate, seems to make a little fundamental sense for you, and go that direction. Get that. This is why the Buddha is often called the middle way, not too tight, not too loose. It doesn't mean go around and never choose anything. Kind of avoid it so you can be someone who never makes a decision or is totally fine without doing anything. Then the other kind that actually grasps onto something and hangs on to it and clings, and then that particular situation, here the metaphor of the supermarket only goes so far. But we tend to go into some kind of some kind of understanding of something that is true and everything else is wrong, or at least I found the right path. I know exactly what to do. And so that seems to be more about not wanting to look anymore, or not wanting to have the feeling of not being sure, that pick and choose too soon. In other words, finally that I'm 18. I know exactly what I want to do. So, and quite often it's however you are brought up, so to speak, however you're raised. And that could be, you could have been brought up in a very nurturing, loving, caring, supportive home. And you could have been born in just the opposite, a very abusive and restrictive and a horrible situation. And, there's so many ways to look at dependent origination. You can say, well, I was really lucky to have been brought up in such a terrible space, because that put me on the spiritual path. And somebody else could say, I was very lucky to have a loving, caring, because that actually helped me to be a loving, caring. But that person might not have a spiritual path. It might be in just one highly sophisticated and polished circle. It's not that it's incorrect. It's just circular. It's circular. It's like from the ultimate point of view, but from a higher point of view, you could line is circular. Even though it looks like a straight line, it looks like you're actually going to paradise, or going to some wonderful place, or or you're being very successful. You're helping people, and you're a very kind person because you were treated very kind. But sometimes we have a family where, and I'm sure some of you probably experienced this, where you have 3 brothers, 3 sisters, a brother and 2 sisters, and one of the people is really highly, you could say, use the word compassionate or caring for others, and another person absolutely doesn't care about anybody but themselves, and they're totally going into some kind of a narcissism. The same family, so same kind of a caring. I saw a family when I was very young where each one of the 3 sisters were all treated completely differently, and they all showed up differently. One was treated like a little angel, and the other was treated like she didn't belong there and needed to go back out on the street. And one was treated, was kind of in the middle. The parents didn't seem to have any opinion on her particularly, not from the point of view of how she was treated. So there's lots of different ways that any situation, whether it's a spiritual path or a mundane path, or your family or your workplace, and as you could talk about this situation of all the variables, all the picking and choosing that we tend to do, until we see that picking the whole. We're going to be talking about the daily Dharma gathering on Tuesday. So there's 6 paramitas. I'm going to be talking about the last one. I think I got that one because I'm the oldest. It's on wisdom, and then the first 5 are generosity, discipline, discipline, patience, energy, meditation, and wisdom. They're going to have a different speaker talk on each one of those. And so those are graduated so that you can slowly begin to understand more deeply how your mind works, how your understanding of the world, how your projections about the world how your beliefs about the world or disbeliefs or ignoring about the world, how that's actually functioning. I think it's very hard to do this with just the intellect alone. Not that there aren't people who do that. Go read Nietzsche. Go read Kierkegaard. Go read free religion circles. But they're circles. They don't go beyond. Even the religious ones like Martin Buber, Jewish theologian, or Kierkegaard, don't actually. There seems to be some kind of a beyond quality happening because they're religious, existentialists, theistic. So as Parivrajakas, at some point, the wandering situation needs to begin to fine tune, and that can only do that not through choice. It needs to do it by choicelessness. If it's not working through choicelessness, then you're still going to be evaluating and wondering if you made the right choice. So the only way you can know you are on the path in this lineage, and I'm fine with other teachers out there, do whatever you want to do. I'm not here about talking about being right. But if you know that you're right, then you're wrong. Am I putting that simply enough? If you think you know something about that, then you have work to do. I'm not saying you're wrong, but the kind of knowing that is a relative kind of knowing is circular. I like questions about this.
So what is the difference between that right kind of a knowing and the choicelessness?
Mm-hmm. So the choicelessness, you're a monk. What got you in here? Did you make a choice to be here? So describe it. Give me 3 words, 5 words.
I saw you.
Yeah. And you what is it? Say it in a couple words. You don't have to elaborate.
I met you and it just seemed to.
Yeah. So you could say that you were wandering around. I know you studied shamanism for many years. And I don't know what else you studied. I know you traveled to different countries looking for a guru. Am I correct? No.
Didn't know it.
Huh?
I didn't know it.
Didn't know. You were looking for something. Parivrajaka, wanderer. We would all have a wandering story of sorts. It might not look like the Tathagata 2,500 years ago, who wandered for what? Several years, 6 years or less. But we all have a kind of a story like that. And with each person, it would be different. I mean, if you listen to someone, they would describe it in a different way. It would be totally different, say, than Shoka's. Go ahead.
Contrast with just different situations, like even being kind, being a form of polished circularity. What does the spiritual path offer in regard to the circularity?
It's a simple question. Relatively or ultimate? Works for me.
I don't know.
How about relative?
Yeah.
Okay. Which one? Which path?
The spiritual path.
The true spiritual path?
Yes.
Doesn't offer anything. If it does, it's not the true spiritual path. Makes any promises at all. Anything at all. It's not that it can't say it'd be a good thing for you to do, but if there's any kind of promise happening, fishy. Somebody wants to control you. Somebody wants a follower. Somebody wants obedience. If somebody wants something from you, probably a little fishy. I'm not saying that this person that may be doing this teaching person might not be sincere. They might be very sincere, but they can't have fundamental sincerity as long as there's someone who's being sincere. The only fundamental sincerity. What you're going to say is more important than what I was going to say.
When you talk about circles, people going in circles, doing things that are circular, it seems to set up like that's something we should not be doing or strive to not do or say that we're doing. What are you pointing at with circles?
circular. Like if you say to somebody, like if you were to say to Junchu, you're going in circles. That'd be helpful to her, wouldn't it?
Nothing I can say to her is helpful.
That's awareness. That's awareness. Bingo. It's not a circle. Not a circle. Hop around.
Can you explain how the Buddha's path is not circular?
Well, it was to start with. I mean, he went in circles because he first sat on hard rocks, and then he went without eating, and then he did all kinds of various things. He tortured himself in different ways, and he went into different jhana states of where the formless realm and the realm of form and different ways of the God realm, the 6 levels of the God realm or whatever. So it was circular for a while until he saw what this was, and he saw it was dependently arisen. What is that? What's the word? Pratitya Samutpada? Is that it? No, I never can remember which is which. They all sound foreign, which they are, of course. But yeah, he saw dependent origination. He saw sometimes called interdependent origination. I like dependent origination. It's very direct. Dependent. Anything you see is dependently originated. It's not self-generated particularly. And he saw that deeply. He saw it so deeply that he actually saw the confusion that was in front of it. And so he didn't need to go any further. He actually didn't go anywhere. But if there could be any kind of movement at all, it would be direct, which is like saying straight line. So a direct understanding. He began teaching out of that because he was asked. I see there's light coming out of your ears. Probably wasn't that, but they noticed something about him that was contrasted from the Parivrajaka that was their homeboy that they hung out with, went around. What should we do? Should we study with this guy? How about this guru? This guru? They studied. He had said to have had 2 teachers, as I recall. Their names escape me because I never remembered them. More? Sokuzan.
Does wandering cease when we begin a spiritual path?
If you idea of how this should look, so therefore the cultural situation that we find ourselves here in Battle Creek, Michigan. I mean, why wouldn't you go to Kalamazoo? We tried. Putting on roots over there, but we still try. I think one of our homeboys, Chazan, goes over there once a week, and he's upstairs. I don't see him.
He's sick.
He's still sick. Sorry that he's sick. Did I finish my sentence? Yes.
It seems like wandering starts with investigation. Once the wandering stops, does the investigation continue?
Yes, it might function in a different way. The investigation, instead of finding something out there on the shelves of the supermarket, or out there looking at, should I look at Adyashanti or Gangaji or in our world or any of these, or go into some other kind of a religion, or should I study under His Holiness Dalai Lama? Well, that would be great, and he's really famous and really well known. You'd be lucky to get an audience with him for more than 3 minutes. I'm not saying you couldn't. You could, and he might be the best person. So there's the right and wrong part is extra. So the only person you may be able to study under may be somebody who's already passed on. So you just study their books or their writings, just like we study the Buddha. Very good to have a personal mentor, teacher, guide. Someone, if you're lucky enough to stumble into someone that you have similar vibration, or at least you're able to, what they say really resonates with you on some really deep level. It might even be a little scary if it's too deep, because you don't really want to be looked at that closely. Depends on what you're ready for. If you're ready for this, then yes. You have a question? Just move your leg. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. You.
When you find the teacher, how does that, or does the investigation continue? Teacher?
Yeah, and you would continue to investigate, who is this? What is that situation? Just who is this? And then we study the teachings every day at noon, as you know, and every Saturday at 11, and every Tuesday night, every Monday night, and in other cities, do a lot of studying of various sutras, including very early teachings, the Nikayas, Majjhima Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, Digha Nikaya. We study those. We haven't studied them, the books recently, but we will. And facing the wall. And how do you do that? You just watch what moves. If you chase this or chase that, if you tamp it down, you can't see what moves. So if you try to make yourself into a meditator, this is a misunderstanding. We're not people that are teaching that way that have students teach the wrong teachers, a misunderstanding. There is no right and wrong way. You may need to study. Well, I'm just telling you, this is how I understand this, and I intend to teach it this way. And if there's 6 people, 8 people, 10 people, 20, 22 people, or no people, I can't do it differently. It's choiceless. Go ahead.
Continue inward?
Until it doesn't. And you want to know what me say? Well, help me. What's the next question?
Is it choiceless?
Yes. The wandering and the searching and the stops when you see there isn't anything else but what you're looking at. You're always looking at what you're looking for. And another way of characterizing it is that which is seeking is that which is seeking is that which you're seeking. It says on, I think the little says, can anybody recite what that says? The historical Rumi. Rumi was named after the historical Rumi, and on his little plumb box, seeking you is another way of saying it. It's an interesting way of phrasing it. Yes.
Intuition on the cushion.
Yes. So intuition, a traditional Western psychological or whatever term of intuition is, that basically is meditation. You sit down and you just don't add, don't subtract, don't divide, do no math at all, no analysis. When you get off the cushion, then think your butt off. I mean, think all you want. But when you're sitting down on the cushion, just observe. And you'll notice it takes some time to that slowly you wean yourself away from constantly obliterating everything in front of you with your dumb ideas about it. You know, I think, well, that's this and that's that. You should be able to get angry without even. Anger is just an emotion, just a feeling. The concept about anger is a baffle, is a filter. Bat wings. It's like a coffee filter with no coffee.
What is intuition?
Seeing the fundamental nature, through awareness, seeing the fundamental nature of what the fancy word is reality, the fundamental nature of anything you look at. You can see everything's fundamental nature. You're no longer confused by anything. Everything, everywhere. It's just that everywhere you look, you see the Buddha, but then you notice that the people that you're looking at don't realize they're the Buddha, that they're not separate from the enlightened one. They're not separate from the Tathagata 2,500 years ago. If you realize that here, and here, there isn't anything you do. Unless situationally things arise that you're tied into that you can't help but do. You don't have, they're choiceless. You do this and you there's no dental work between one thing and another thing that brings about some kind of unity. You don't need unity if you see nothing as separate. We're all one. This is just a ego mind trying to keep you from looking closely into what the ego is. Ego is terrified of being discovered. And if you're not experiencing that terror, then you will. Unless you can figure out some way to derail, get off the path. Don't do this. Go back into making cheese sandwiches or whatever it was you did before you stumbled into this. Some people, if you don't know that, then you haven't been around here long enough. And threatening to different people in different ways. Some people in ways that totally they think they're just the truth. This person is just out to get me or out to control me or out to molest me. I don't do anything with it. And if you consider yourself a student of mine, then be a student, practice. And if you have considerations about this, talk to me about it. I'm much more available than either of my teachers ever were. I couldn't talk to any of them. The last one avoided me. That's how powerful that teaching was. Yes.
Were your teachers threatening?
Yes.
How are you threatening to us?
Well, probably not to you. You know how I'm threatening. You want to go there?
Yes.
I thought you were more chicken. Okay, then ask me a question. I don't want a generic one, just ask it. Something that's workable to address what you just asked me.
Are you saying that you're threatening in your behavior towards us?
Somewhat. I think what I would like to say, and those of you who've been around here for a while might agree with, or maybe not, as I'm unpredictable. How do I know that? I don't even know what I'm going to do. From one moment to the next, nothing is planned. And part of that is because, although when I was young, I was extremely sensitive to what other people thought about me. That's kind of gone away. The sensitivity has not gone, but the one who is worried is gone. And how have they gone? They haven't gone anywhere. They're still here, but they're not real. You don't have to get rid of. You can actually live your life. You can actually be who you are. Even though the things your mom, dad pointed out, that those crummy things, they said you need to stop being that way or doing that. And the things that I've told you that this really sucks. I don't really want a student that acts like you do. Did I tell you that yet? I haven't told you that yet. Okay. Unpredictable. In other words, you can't find a dynamic that will give you some kind of relative comfort. Sir?
What keeps the unpredictability from being haphazard?
Good question. Haphazard is an imputation that you may give to what I do. Does it look like I'm haphazard? What's
Oh, no.
yeah, somehow no. So what's the continuity? If you don't see the huh?
If there was any, it'd be the unpredictability itself.
Okay. Not too bad. Anyone else? Yes. Huh? Go ahead.
Do you have an agenda?
Yes, I do. What is my agenda? You don't know? Save all beings. The other way of saying it, be with all things. Whatever arises, don't agree, don't disagree, don't look away.
Does your ego mind have an agenda?
Yeah. Of course, I have all kinds of opinions and ideas. You don't really want to know what I think of you. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I have all this has been going on since I was born. Intense ideas, opinions about everything. They're unreal. Even if there's a relative truth to the situation, they can't find somebody who feels that way. The feeling is looking for somebody, It's like a bunch of spiders crawling over you, all over you, and then suddenly the invisibility pills work. No? Invisibility pills, visible, spiders. You guys are hilarious. More? Good question.
Might somebody who realizes or sees no self be predictable?
It could be more predictable because they have just a more conventional way of teaching. Yeah, they could be. Not thinking of anyone, but the Buddha was fairly predictable from what we have from the so-called history. He wasn't too outlandish because we had his culture was very. I mean, people could just walk out and beg, and the people wanted to were on a spiritual path because they couldn't do it. They had to make a living, they had to feed their family. So going from house to house, and you can't do that here. You know, you could be locked up for being a homeless or a vagrant or panhandling or something. More?
So whenever you feel like, or whenever you say that you don't know what you're going to do, is that coming out of your particular style?
I don't know, probably. More? Yes.
Is the wish to save all beings the continuity?
Yeah. That would be a way of talking about continuity, just because you see there aren't any beings to save. So you see it at the same time. You see the fullness of all beings, and you see the emptiness of there is no separate self anywhere. So it's an astonishing situation that what this is could break up into parts and hide out from itself. It's just astonishing. And you get to awaken to that. You get to awaken where everywhere you look, you see yourself. You don't see yourself. Everybody isn't going to look like you look. Lucky us. Oh, that hurt Daddy's feelings. That was a joke, man. He's extremely handsome, especially his eyes. Have you noticed his eyes? I don't need to convince you. So if you see what this is, there isn't anything else to do. There isn't anyone else but you. Not you, the ego you, but there isn't anything but this. So what do? You take care of this. That's the continuity. You take care of everything you see needs your care. Every piece of wood, every ant on the ground, every bird in the sky, every human being that walks in this monastery, and the ones that walk by that have no concern with this at all. This doesn't mean you go around and start giving money to all the people who are carrying cardboard signs that say, God bless you. But it also doesn't mean you avoid them either. You might find yourself, without really knowing why you're doing it, you might find those people you just respond to. It might be something might not have to do with thought, more with just some kind of feeling about that person that you might give them a couple bucks or whatever. I'm just using that to say that you can't find a continuity. If you find continuity, that's separation. Here's the continuity. Here's you finding it. Duality. You are continuity. That's why you can't do compassion, even though it's taught differently. You can't do wisdom. I'm going to talk about that on whatever day it is. Other people are going to talk about generosity and discipline and patience, energy. And those are more relative things. Those are something more you can practice, but very difficult to practice wisdom. Very difficult to practice compassion because it tends to limit us into feeling for, or sometimes some people will get carried away with wanting to be a compassionate person because they know they suck, they know they're really terrible, and they know they've treated people like crap. So they decided to be compassionate. So they start working on that relatively. I'm not saying that couldn't be helpful and might be, but it will only be workable in a relative kind of way. The ultimate situation has not been touched because it makes a circle. This doesn't mean that the person who does that is a bad person or wrong or shouldn't be doing that or should be listening to what I'm saying. If you're not listening to what I'm saying, It's totally accurate. If you're listening to what I'm saying, totally accurate. I don't need 1,000 people. I don't need followers, as I say, yes.
Is there help that addresses something fundamentally?
Yes. Don't meddle with it. Don't meddle with anything based on your idea about something. If you see what this is, you won't separate yourself in such a way that you'll rely on the thinking process to do anything other than measure a piece of lumber in your case. Thoughts are made to help us deal with a relative situation and some aspects of the relative situation that have moved into those other dimensions, abstract thought and so on, to deal with computers. Can you build a computer out of wood?
Probably.
I rest my case. Did that work? Yes.
Earlier in the talk, you said something about how wandering needs to be fine-tuned. Fine-tuned.
It's like when you use a metaphor, and this is a metaphor only works so far. It's when you begin to see what kind of cheesecake you really want. Then you don't go over into the bananas and walk off into the other part of the store, seeing which kind of strobe light should I get. Who's making the cheesecake? So it's kind of a dumb metaphor, but it's like that. When you realize when you came here, you'd already been, not to characterize too much about your life, but you've been raised in a spiritual home, as I recall, and you looked in several directions there. And at some point, out of causes and conditions that were somewhat choiceless for you, you found yourself here, and here you are. And so this tends to have, because it's about you and your practice, not about you adhering to some kind of cultural structure and form where you just become a member of it. You actually are this. You are this Sangha. Buddha and Dharma and Sangha are often misunderstood as it's basically described as the teaching in the community. But those also go the other direction. The Sangha is the Buddha. The teaching is the Sangha. And the Buddha is, need I go further? More?
What kind of cheesecake do you like?
I like cheesecake that has no sugar in it. And I like cheesecake that has whipped cream on top. And did you really want to know, or are you just trying to be? Oh, okay. No, and also, what is that stuff?
Cream cheese and sour cream.
Cream
and eggs.
cheese and sour cream and eggs.
And vanilla.
And vanilla.
And lemon juice.
A little bit of lemon juice. Yes.
After Chogyam passed away, did you wander until you met Kobun?
No, I did not. I was not wandering when I met him. So after Trungpa passed away, I just noticed that I didn't mind him passing away. I also noticed that I didn't miss him. And I also noticed that whatever it was about him was still there. And it's here now. And I'm not talking about some kind of woo-woo, Trungpa's becomes more a collection of stuff. I don't need that kind of propaganda. I didn't. It was in 1987. April the 4th, 1987. I was down at what's that city down there? I just kind of noticed. It wasn't like it fell a little. There was no wandering. The wandering is over with. I still had all kinds of practice to do. So he'd already told me what to do, and I was still doing it. In with him, but he'd already pretty much told me what I should do. More about that, or no? I wasn't wandering when I met Kobun. Kobun actually just showed me that I needed to wander a little more. I wasn't done. Basically, he showed me that I wasn't done. And so, yeah. More? Okay. Cool. Yes.
Wasn't done with what?
Practicing or searching or looking for something else, or looking for something more. I'd come to a conclusion about my practice that I knew what I needed to know and I didn't need any more help from a teacher. He showed me that that was incorrect, and without even saying anything. He waited until I asked him something. That's why I'm always saying, ask me a question. I asked him to be my teacher, and he immediately corrected me. That's the last thing. That was the last bit of help, literal help I could get out of him. Everything from then on was, how does it feel like to be alone? That's how it felt. He really wouldn't talk to me anymore after that. Yes.
Sometimes you come up to the altar and you'll adjust something, but I think you ask sometimes, like, if you're correcting something, and what does it mean to correct?
Why don't you ask me why I do that?
Why do you adjust the altar?
I don't know. So this is my mind. I'm correcting from a relative point of view. I'm correcting my mind, and when you come up to my mind and don't put things back where they belong, then I have to come and readjust everything. You follow that? This is only meant for him. The rest of you are fine. Sometimes the bell and dorje are too far away from that little line right there. You know where they belong. See,
When it comes to saving sentient beings, I know the temptation for me is to correct. How do we do it without correcting?
feel and actually have the feeling of correcting and stop trying to correct yourself about that and allow that feeling to come up and just feel that. Give it plenty of attention. Just be with the feeling. If you don't push the feeling away by actually literally trying not to think that, or if you justify the feeling by fluffing it up with your ideas, your interpretations, your evaluations, and so on, you're actually covering up the awareness that needs to be with that or see that or in that, and by ignoring or distracting. So don't do anything, just feel that. But don't necessarily turn it into your vocal cords or your activity. You need to pick up that dog poop. More?
Yes. In being human and still finding myself occasionally correcting, especially another person. And I see myself doing that, then what?
Stop it. You know how to do it. I mean, you might have to play with it. It might be harder to do unless there's a strong sitting practice. And so you can we practice. It's hard to deal with human beings, of course, because they're all over the place. But you can when you sit down and do shikantaza, just watch what moves, whether it's thoughts, emotions, feelings, memories, body aches and pains, no matter what it is, any form that arises. It means that anything that arises that's separate from, shows up in contrast from what was happening a few minutes ago, it's a form. And then do nothing with it. Don't accept it, don't reject it, don't look away. And how do we do that? We notice how some things come up and we want to add on. Some things come up and we want to push them down. And also when you do that, then keep it on a very simple level. Don't put layers of, concepts and ideas on top of it. And eventually, through doing that, you're actually saving all beings. A thought that arises just like a human being. Not the same, but that's the way you can practice. Let things be what they are. The most negative feeling and emotion, do not interrupt that. Don't validate it, and don't do anything with the energy other than just see it as energy. Don't look at it and intellectually translate it into something, a comment, oh, this is just energy. Don't do that. That's like trying to scale a fish with a welding glove on. Well, that's just what showed up. So take the glove off. Probably shouldn't be scaling a fish, but you could pet a cat. Just feel that, how that feels. The feeling of that is, can be at once abrasive and difficult, but there's something that is real, and it's not a certainty about something, it's a certainty about that you're actually, the consciousness there's no filter between the feeling of something and the consciousness that is experiencing that feeling. Very difficult to do that without the mind coming in and commenting some way or another, in some kind of intercessor or interlocutor or loper, or what are those L words? Kuhn knows which one it is. Which one is it? Yeah. So what am I coming back to? Just awareness. And you can't do that by thinking about it. You have to actually expose yourself to that minimalist approach to the mind, which is sit down, hold still, and watch the complications slowly start to settle down and back off. It takes years. You know this. You've been practicing for a long. It takes years. And if you're doing it with eyes closed, it's going to probably take more years.
When you say stop it, when she says that she can see that she's correcting people, how does that work when we also talk about if you stop something prematurely without seeing what it is, then you're just going in circles?
So I'm saying this, I have to use relative concepts. So fundamentally, we like to stop that. So when I say stop it, I'm also knowing that you can't just stop it. If you're good, we wouldn't even be in here. We would just, we would just be happy. Wouldn't we? If you had total control of your mind, you need to do this, we'd just be happy. Well, that was easy. That'll be $50. So when I'm saying, when I say stop it, I'm saying it because I'm not going to say that in a way that I can't continue to interact with, like I'm doing with Katie. I'm saying stop it, and then I wait to see what she does with that. And then I've tried to stop it, and she said that. I said, well, I don't exactly mean stop it, but that engages the conversation so we can talk about the nature of that, because the guesswork that we have about ourselves that we need to stop things, and we fundamentally don't. But what that will bring us to is how we don't have any say-so, but we can't stop it. And that would be the next thing that come up, and I'd say, yeah, I call that awareness. I can't stop it. You might have to start with how little control you have, or how little control any of us have over any kind of outcome. I say over and over again, I think it's a great experience. Just go to the mirror, spend 10 minutes there, look at the mirror, look in the mirror, look at your image in the mirror. And then after about 5 or 10 minutes, you should spend more than a couple minutes, say, what did I have to do with that? What that is in front of me, did I have any control over? Did I choose? Other than maybe your haircut. It's kind of a surfacey thing, but you did that. Maybe, maybe there might be something else that would show up for you there. But it's a very, very good exercise to do, to realize how really there's a whole lot of things going on we have no say-so over, and one of them is our life. But once you see that, then the interesting thing, if you're really clear about that, then you see those particular areas of your life that you do have some say-so over, that you can actually get your butt to the cushion and sit down and hold still and watch and train the mind to go more deeply into that area that we've been closed off from probably since we were born. And we've been trained not to look at through our culture, our psychological culture, our spiritual training and conditioning, and just enculturation. More? Yes.
Choicelessness doesn't always seem benign. Is there a way to distinguish between a kind of choicelessness that keeps us locked in circles and a choicelessness that is guiding us along the path?
So here's how I'll comment on that, or respond to that. I'll say, do a lot of sitting meditation, where the idea is just to sit down, hold still. Whether there's an altar there, whether you do chants or whether you do sutras, I'm not too interested in that. We could introduce that if you needed those kind of forms. I think they're good, but I wouldn't push that. So sit down, hold still, watch what continues to move. When you hold the body very still, And then when you get up off the cushion, don't do anything unless you have to. And then you will notice you'll be more clear over time. You'll be more clear about the things you're impulsively still doing and the other things where it's not that you have a choice so much as you notice there's an impulse, but you don't hook up your vocal cords. You kind of intercept it. It's not an interception that is like a Martian military kind of thing. It's one based on awareness. It's one where you're looking at something and you're saying, I'm not going to have cream in my coffee today. I'm just coming up with that because that's how it functions for me. Sometimes I have cream, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I eat, sometimes I don't. More about that if that's not connecting with that particular area the question comes out of.
No, for now, thank you.
Goes on.
It seems like when we start wandering or searching, it might be out of knowing it or not, what's in it for me. So if you mentioned earlier resonating with, when you find a community or a teacher, what's the difference? Is there a recognizable difference between a genuine resonance and really good Kool-Aid?
Yeah. So in other words, resonating with a spiritual path or just running into a cult, what we call a cult.
Yeah, or something that's just kind of,
Kool-Aid.
yeah. Or something that's like serving a need that's just taking you.
I think it's, again, dependent origination makes it so different for each person. And there's no, if there's any kind of sales pitch going on, a red flag should go up. Or if there's any kind of anybody coming to you trying to manipulate you or get you or convince you, including Sangha members. If you're in a spiritual community, shall we say it that way. Anybody that has some kind of agenda about controlling you or trying to convince you or giving you a sales pitch or anything. And now if someone asks you a question, of course you can respond. Well, what are you doing here? So this, how are we going to say it? This works for me and this has helped me. But nothing beyond that. Just respond to the question. Nothing beyond that. And that keeps things clear. That's like I often say here, if any, I don't want any gossip happening here. It's just so destructive. If you have gossip, then get into that and be respectful to other people. Other people have causes and conditions and confusion that you may not have that show up to you as, oh, what the hell are they doing that for? What the hell? Give people the benefit of the doubt, especially in a tight, when I say tight, a small community like this, which is pretty small. I like it small.
In a situation where someone's doing something that they might not even realize it's bothering you, is it helpful to them on their path to see how their actions are kind of bleeding into your life?
Maybe. The causes and conditions are so complicated in that area that you would need to do it situationally on the spot. You'd have to do it on the spot and trust yourself. And you may function in a certain way and see where I probably overstepped my situation. And then you could actually say to the person, whoops, sorry about that. I could say, apologize once. One apology is actually about them, about being a little remorseful about, poking them. You apologize more than that, then it's about you wanting to be someone who's forgiven, or you don't need forgiveness. Forgiveness is, I don't want to disagree with anyone because a lot of people are preaching forgiveness, but I think it's stupid. Why would you need it? If you were living in it with integrity, even though 3 years ago you were, doing horrible, terrible things, but you can't cling to the past. You can't cling to past mistakes or misunderstandings. I mean, you can, but you have to be here. That isn't so-called letting you off the hook. It's just realizing the nature of this is there can be a little bit of remorse about that. But you could trust yourself to step into that and see what happens, especially if it's a Sangha member. Question? Okay.
Sokuzan, when you spoke about having cream in your coffee or not.
Yeah.
Is there any sense in choicelessness of surrendering?
So surrendering, if it's surrendering to something or as something, I'm just surrendering. Or if it's surrendering as I'm just going to surrender to this, then that's fishy. But no, surrendering should if we use that word the way I understand it, you won't know that you've done that. You won't have there won't be no credential because there isn't anyone to surrender. So actual surrendering, fundamental surrendering, is seeing having a deep understanding of, it's called wisdom, of there are no separate beings. It's just an intense illusion that we all buy into and believe and fight with each other and fight with ourselves and agree with ourselves and disagree with ourselves. And it's, you know what I'm saying. Yes.
Is it healthy if we're on this path to make contact with that desire, pushing, pulling, ignorance, and just surrendering to allowing the situation to unfold?
Don't do it. There's too much of an agenda about it. Because if you do that, then you're going to look for results. And did it work? Works in some ways. That will work. The did it work situation is helpful, but I would be very careful about looking for any results. What's important here, and you hear me say it over and I'll say it again, just observe the distress. Just observe the delusion. There isn't anyone to observe that, and to see that that you're witnessing something without a witness or without an observer is an astonishing realization. And I hope that all comes about for each one of you. That's my interest, is in helping you with that, not in getting you to become a Buddhist or receive precepts or control you or memorizing anything. Find out who you are. So there's no doubts. You have no doubt. So you no longer spread your misunderstanding onto the world. Yes?
That teaching about just observing, sometimes I have a visceral reaction to it, like just my whole energy just kind of like sinking down. It's very dark. Mm-hmm. Just observe that.
Yeah.
As long as it lasts, it lasts.
Yes.
Is that what
I don't. The control you need is to hold the body still. And at some point you'll have a deeper understanding of what control is. Hold the body still. And then watch that. And if it if it gets really dark, I'm not saying this is not torture yourself, then stop, get up, go to the carnival, have ice cream, play with your cat. You have a cat? Yeah. Meow, meow. They're cats, oh my goodness. They're just like in samadhi all the time. Haven't you noticed?
Yes.
Just like 1-year-olds, they're kind of in samadhi too. Especially our temple resident, Rumi. He's always spot on. More about that or less?
Oh, just reading the sutras, and it talks about bliss and nirvana and samadhi,
Yeah.
and that. And it's not really something that, it's very difficult to generate that.
You don't have to generate it. Just stop getting in the way of it. And how do you do that? Yeah, you just watch, you just observe yourself, keep objecting and agreeing and shutting down the 3 poisons. And then variations on that, various nuance of aspects of ignoring and agreeing, or aspects of ignoring and aggression, or passion and aggression, and all the different ways that shows up for us in our mind, or sometimes we see it in others. Do nothing with it other than just receive, like I'm saying over and over again. Give everything your attention. Starting with your own thought patterns. Just give it just watch the thought patterns come and go.
Is that part of what we have a choice over?
You have a little bit of choice. You can actually sit down, hold still, and observe. And that observing is going to show up how you can't really observe very well. So that's how we train our mind. Just like if you were literal lifting weights, you would notice how it's really hard to lift weights at first, but it gets it's easier. It's even though you might still feel it's difficult, it's you're actually be able to do that more expediency and more directness and so on. A similar kind of exercise, except it's an invisible muscle. And it doesn't actually function exactly like a muscle because it's already the case. This is what a misunderstanding when people train, and I don't mean to make the whole Tibetan lineage is wrong. I'm just saying that in that time, in that culture, in that situation, that's the only way they could teach it. And might be the only way, if I had heaven forbid, I had 1,000 students, I might be teaching much differently than I'm doing now, teaching directly to 1,000 people. And I've got there might be 3 or 4 people on the line. There's not very many people are interested in this, in the way I do this. So I would say sit down, hold still, watch what moves, so that you could say deepen your wisdom or stop covering up the wisdom that's already the case. This is the great perfection talked about by Longchenpa in the Dzogchen teachings, the Mahabodhi teachings. This is already true. You're already perfect. You don't need to be somebody else. If you realize that, work is done. You're free. You're not free from something. You're not free to something. Which from the relative point of view makes no sense. That's because relativity and ultimate are no longer 2 separate things. Fundamentally non-dual or Advaita.
If you were teaching to 1,000 students and your style changed, would your...
It could be. Is that good enough? It could be. I don't know. It's kind of a
style that would change if there were so many people.
I have no idea. I sense that probably occur, but I don't know that. It's because I came up with a name for this talk, I don't know, 2 hours ago. And I also didn't know what I was going to say. I was on the internet trying to figure out if Parivrajaka was a name I'd heard, and I knew what it meant, but I didn't know if it was I thought it was Sanskrit, by the way it was spelled. The romanization of it was, I figured it was probably Sanskrit, but I thought, well, maybe it's Pali, or maybe it's, and then I thought, well, I could ask Bhaskar, because he probably would know, but I don't know where Bhaskar's at. He might be watching at some point. Yes.
What Hakaran asked, like she brought up like how some of the teachings talk about bliss and a bunch of stuff that sounds really good.
Yeah.
And you even mentioned the great perfection. Is your understanding of that different than something like bliss?
Well, give me a more direct. I follow you, but ask it so that this will work for people a lot less intelligent than you are.
Is the great perfection pointing at something besides bliss?
So bliss is a way, you have to use words, but bliss, the way I would use the word bliss is the understanding that even though you're having really negative thoughts, you're really having a difficult time with your life. It's kind of a bitch. Things are, but there's no identity that really cares about that anymore. So whatever is happening, we're not saying it all feels good, but we're saying that the basic freedom that you're no longer confined by, as Nagarjuna said in praise of Dharmadhatu, you're no longer there's no longer a cage of your afflictions. Afflictions may be there and they may not. They may vanish. They may stay around. You don't care because they can't find you. The afflictions are flying around. It's like bars with no prisoner. There's one, and then you notice another feeling comes and goes, but it doesn't find anybody that gives a crap about it. Wouldn't it be great if you had a negative emotion recently? Yeah, I thought so. Wouldn't it be good? Wouldn't it be interesting if you had a negative emotion and you didn't care if it stayed there forever? Yeah, I'm fine with that. You wouldn't even make that comment because there's some kind of pride in that. I can handle my negative feelings now. It's actually, you actually may actually feel miserable. The emotion of misery cannot find someone who's miserable. But that doesn't mean the emotion of misery, which is dependently arisen, isn't searching for somebody to hang that bag of bones on. More?
What do we do with those things that come up if we don't see that there's no one there doing that? How are we affecting that differently?
We add on to it a reality, and the way to work with that is to go in the direction of having the feeling, and that's why I say, be a good host. And I go to the identity part of the feeling, then rather than saying there's no self, there's no one, it's just empty, misunderstanding. I'm not that kind of a teacher. So when I say actually go in, look for the me feeling, look for I, look for me. See if there's anyone that actually shows up to claim that emotion or that feeling. Go ahead.
When you talk about misery, you're looking for something to hang its hat on. Can that misery find something to use or to project onto without our say so?
Good question. That's ego will do that. Ego will say, I'm not really here. I'm really nobody. I'm just empty space. Because it looks for an experience of emptiness, an experience of no self, and if it finds the slightest little twinge of no self, what does it do with that? Credential. And so it's the one who actually entertains and has a little scenario that is just going with the negative feeling. No, it's worse than that. If you have any thoughts about it, then you have not run into the desolation and the disappointment that is the nature of awakening from the point of view of ego. It's desolate. There isn't anything else. You aren't going to get anything out of this.
How do you be a good host without the entertainment?
No, just enjoy yourself. I mean, you used the word, I didn't. If you use the word entertainment, then...
Well, you said ego is finding a place, now I'm in this empty space, that's something
That's right.
drifting past.
Then enjoy it.
House.
Then enjoy it. But feel that quality, and it won't last. Eventually you'll see this is fake. I'm on a stage. This is a costume. Whatever this is, it's unreal. If you can, move to the front row and keep observing. Leave the theater. Good.
So in those situations where you're visited by a darkness,
Yeah.
a little black cloud in a dress,
Yes.
that stays.
Stop calling it that, for one thing. Don't give it a name anymore. If you give it a name again, change the name every 8 days. Make it every 7 days. And don't have the name be something it doesn't. So have no idea what you're naming. So you have no idea. Like you call it a bag of marshmallows. And then the next 7 days later, if that comes in, you've heard me talk to you about this.
And I think you said, call it a carrot.
Yeah, call it a carrot. Yeah, it's like, what a terrible way the carrot must feel.
So when that happens
Yes.
and I add to it or something is happening here, does this have the power to extend the duration of that negative, or am I, by transforming it somehow?
Just give me a question. I don't want either or. Give me a straight question. I'll deal with the polarity. Just ask me half of that.
When I feel sucked down by the negativity.
What's the question? Right there. What's the question?
Am I extending its duration?
No. You ask me when I feel, because you can't control what you feel. It's like I said earlier, if we can do that, let's be happy. End of monastery. Turn it back into what it was, this place, but a VFW hall, Veterans of Foreign
So
Wars.
whether or not I add to it, or
Hmm.
it stays as long as it stays.
Yes, but my way of talking about it is it probably will prolong it if one of the three poisons becomes active in that area. If you're clear that you're being aggressive with it, then that kind of wears out also. But the emotion itself actually can run its course. But the difficulty with dependent origination is we impute that there's just this person, just this lifetime. And I'm not saying there's other lifetimes. I don't know if there is or not. Don't care. Not interested. But I'm saying this situation, the idea of time is a belief and an imputation. That we believe that something started here and went to here, and now we're here and we're going to live so much longer and then we'll be gone. And we have all these structure. And what I'm saying is just be aware of it. If you do anything with it, you tend to buy into the relative construct that's called physical form coming into this realm of desire. Go ahead.
If I'm adding to it, if I'm acting out through one of the three aggressions, the three poisons, am I changing it?
If you're adding to it, yeah. Yeah. You're modifying it in such a way that it gives it more life, because then it kind of has its own kind of reality. Well, if you're doing nothing with it, it can't get any. It gets its nutrition of some kind of extended longevity from your fiddling with it, or liking it, or disliking it, or ignoring it, or doing anything with it. It came out of causes and conditions that were started before you got here, more than likely. And I would say just receive, give everything your attention, and when it shows up, just be a good host. Let it come. And eventually it won't find anyone. It'll go come in the front door. If you looked at it as a metaphor of a house, it comes right in the front door, and there's nobody objecting to it, agreeing with it, or ignoring it. It will go right on through, to use the metaphor of the 8 consciousnesses of the Yogacara teaching.
What is the relationship between experiencing something in its original state and it just moving through?
I'm not sure. I'm not experiencing something.
Something comes. It hits.
Yeah, something happens.
I
Emotion.
I don't resist it.
Yeah. Okay.
I experience it.
Well, yeah, somewhat. Yeah, I would say so.
What's the relationship between that, no resistance, I'm experiencing the original state, and its duration, or it's just moving through?
So, if I understand the way you're asking, if you do nothing with it, it may feel more intense, rather than if you do something with it, it may feel more. Because if you're doing something with it, you might be covering up the sharp edges and causing it the duration to last, or giving it some kind of imputing some kind of reality to it that will buy into the causes and conditions that are already here in this realm, in this kind of physical, low burn, low frequency thing called light, gravity, time, space. Doing something, and it means something, what we do and what we don't do. Not that it doesn't mean something, but having a wider, broader understanding of that, without concluding, without excluding, without shutting down. So if you do add on or something, it may not hurt as much. It may be more easier, it may be more apparent, or some kind of control or something. You may fixate on that and kind of condition yourself to always function that way. And the only way you'll know that you've done that is when some situation comes that, because of dependent origination, because things are not separate, something comes along that has that similar frequency. Could be another person, could be a situation. Suddenly, instead of having a kind of an ordinary, 3 degrees of reaction to that, instead you've got 50, because you have all this unexperienced emotion has been hiding out in the 7th consciousness, or the 8th, or the 9th, or the 10th, or whatever level of consciousness. And suddenly it finds a way out through, because of dependent origination, because of not separate, because the separation is an illusion. But things are separated. But when that frequency starts, it's mechanical. There's nothing personal, and it's mechanical. You're going along fine. Suddenly, something happens out here that triggers something. Suddenly, you're erupting in some kind of emotion based on something else that happened that was very small. But here, you're having intense feelings. The other thing that can happen is nothing can happen out here. You can't find any reason for it, and you have intense feelings of angst or anxiety, sometimes called depression. And what do they do with depression? They want to cover it up with Medicaid so you don't feel. And this path is not about covering anything up. This path is about if you feel, the downside of feeling intense feelings and emotions that come out of an apparent past is it sucks. It's painful. But the upside is this is a way to live in this world and actually be with all things, to actually live your life. I often say, don't miss your life by covering anything up. This doesn't mean you shouldn't take aspirin or acetaminophen, but people tend to go overboard with that kind of thing, as we know. Sir?
When it comes to the unexamined aggression, does that imply that it's examinable?
Sure.
How can we is the only way to examine it to watch it come up?
Yes. Just observe. And as there's various nuances happening depending on the person. That's why they call it a practice. You might have to do this for a long time. You might have to look at your aggression come and go and all these different masks. Aggression coming as depression. That's a hard one to see, but it's a kind of intense hatred. So it needs to be seen, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that.
So you're going to come back?
It might.
Well, what do they usually say? Well, it must have not been important.
Not so sure about that.
Yes. Yeah.
Bhaskar is watching.
Bhaskar.
He said, yes, I am watching and enjoying, and it is a Sanskrit word.
Oh, thank you.
Though I don't know Pali, over the period of my book study with Sokukoji, I have noticed that Pali does not seem to have compounded letters like VRA in Parivrajaka.
Okay, Parivrajaka. I spelled it Parivrajaka.
Parivrajaka.
Okay, did I misspell it?
I don't know, because I didn't see.
Well, it's a romanization, so it might be a different way.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Well, good. Well, thank you. I stand corrected. Or whatever, yes. Got
Is
it?
there a way to successfully watch aggression arise?
So the success and failure part is extra. You don't need to have some kind of aggression watching indicator or a measurement like 5 degrees, 8 degrees. I mean, not that you couldn't possibly come up with something like that, but it would be better to just, whatever is arising, to not really have a measurement mindset. So just observe it. Be genuine, because the world isn't going to come to you already pre-measured, like some kind of a recipe, or some kind of a paint by number or something painting. It's going to be chaotic, and until you see what it is. And when you see what it is, and everything is perfect all the time in the midst of the suffering. Yes, sir.
So what you just said there, that's not success?
What?
To see what it is?
No, there's no one being successful.
So if I'm adding in the midst of aggression, that's not failure?
No. But you think it is. Always about awareness. It's never about correcting or changing. Although the temptation to, if we start to get a really good view of something we're doing, there's a temptation to go on and manipulate that somehow. And I wouldn't slam that gate too quick just because you found out where the handle and the hinges were. I would actually let that be open for a while. Allow yourself to feel that negativity. And you could say, or you could ask, is that control? A little bit. But it's more of a control where you don't do something rather than a control where you do something. It's like even sitting meditation is it's a minimalist approach. It's a elimination diet for ego, as I've said before. Sit down, hold still, and just eliminate everything you can without being aggressive or grasping or ignoring. Just sit down and turn everything, all your senses, including your mind, on receive. When you do that, then anything that moves, any thought, emotion, memory, anything that moves, just give it your attention. And if you do that over time, then eventually there won't be a then. Just a negative way of talking about it. Further question? Take one more if there is one. Sir.
So much earlier you said after you're done meditating, don't do anything unless you have to. And I've heard you say that before. So how do you what you don't have to do?
Mm-hmm. I think if you kind of keep that in mind for a while, and I think it could show up differently with each person. Some people might be able to might catch on to that right away, and because they're more clear about all the things that kind of extraneous things that they've been doing just in case. You know, just hit a nerve there. So just in case, I want to do that just in case, and you know, you could even set up a time frame, since we're all using this time. You know, for the next week, I'm going to look very closely at that and see if I can work in a way where I don't have to do anything. And I wouldn't go overboard and be some kind of a maniac about it. But just notice that one of the ways you're doing that really you're kind of they don't have a strong backing from anything other than you just want to fill up space. When we do things we don't really have to do, quite often it's filling up space. It's kind of a low level kind of boredom. It's not exactly boredom, but it's just too much space, and we want to fill it up with activity or doing something. Again, it's not so much about stopping that. It's if you take that kind of I'm going to look and see what I'm doing that I don't need to do. You might do that for a while, like I said, a week or something like that. Set a time. Set it up so you actually remember to do it. I would have to do that because I'd forget what I was doing. But and then at the end of that, then you could just resume and go back and do things that you don't need to do. So might help. Further question about that would help. I could possibly fine tune what I just said to your style if you have anything further about it. Yeah. Well, does it ring true with you a little bit? You asked a question, so I feel like it must be something in that makes some sense to you. So I would just play with the ideas, move those concepts around, and maybe apply it as something you're going to do for a day. You're going to just watch anything you're doing. You don't really need to do that. You could even comment on it. I don't really need to say hello to this person. In your case, you're a teacher in a school. I don't really need to say this. And I'm not saying go overboard and never talk to anybody and kind of grip onto some opposite of everything. But just you could experiment a little bit and notice how that. I'm just going to use an example here, but say every morning in the hallway you walk by this particular person or teacher or someone, and you always say that. You don't need to do that. And don't misunderstand, I'm not picking on any kind of friendly. I think that's a good idea to greet people and be friendly. And the reason you would have to do that would be it's good to stay connected with people. So you could take it the other way. So there might be some other situation that you could interrupt that a little bit to see what it's like. There's other things around that could come up, but it would almost have to come out of your questions. So otherwise, I would be going too far into the way it shows up for me, and it would be less of happening where I'm kind of trying to inspire somebody to check that out a little bit in their life. What are you doing that you don't have to do? You could end up leaving the monastery. You don't have to be here. I often say that if you don't have to be here, go somewhere else. Yes, sir.
What's the difference between something that we have to do and something that might be like culturally or socially preferable, like doing the dishes or something like that?
You have to do that.
I also live with Michael. I didn't think you could do the dishes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you could answer that question.
It just seems to get really tangled.
So keep it very simple. Keep it to something that's not interpersonal with others. That might be a little bit difficult to work with, although at some point you can be doing that. But you could do it with, when you have a part-time job, when you go to your job, something about the habit patterns that you do. There's two ways to do it. One is you can eliminate something. You can eliminate something. You don't have to do that. You don't have to sit this in your car seat in the morning. You could keep it in your pocket or something, or maybe a cup of coffee or something like that. But I mean, find something like that you can interrupt something you normally do. That's a way to play with it a little bit initially. And another thing is you can do something that makes no sense, which is kind of the opposite. Has a similar. There's one that I was telling people to do a long time ago that just happened to show up a very long time ago. Do something that, take a grease pencil and take half a dozen glasses out of your cupboard and put an X on the bottom of it. Huh?
Does everybody know what a grease pencil is?
Does anybody here not know what a grease pencil is? Well, you have to get some grease. You take a pencil and you dip it in the grease. It's a you could use a crayon. You know what a crayon is? I'm aging fast. So to do something that is it wouldn't have to be something that odd. It could be something you're doing a certain way and change your pattern in there. Let's change the habit pattern slightly. It tends to break down the way the mind is working to cover things up. It tends to show up things that you've been ignoring that are very ordinary. We can talk more about it at some point if you want. Yes, one more.
You once told me to go to my freezer and get the ice tray and dump it in my living room.
I don't remember that. Did you do
It
it?
was life-changing.
I rest my briefcase. Yeah. So kind of breaking into that somehow just brings a little bit of ventilation into our stodginess. Thank you, my friends.